Today we're going to talk about depth and complexity in video games. Depth and complexity are both important concepts for games that revolve around decision making, and examining your games through this lens can help your game become more coherent, easier to approach, and harder to completely solve. Some games, however, do not revolve around decision making, and for those games, like Super Hexagon for instance, this is not a very relevant talk. Complexity is the amount of knowledge that a player must have to make a decision. Look at the amount of data and the number of rules that a player needs to know at each decision point. Now, complexity changes with players' experience as the decisions they make change over the course of the game, and it's very important to calculate the deltas in complexity. A game with good onboarding can get away with a lot more complexity than one that simply front loads an info dump. Now, where this becomes interesting is in chess and Go, which are both typically praised for their low complexity, as in both cases, the total amount of raw data and the number of rules are very low. It's very easy to go from never having played to being able to make legal moves. However, going from being able to make legal moves to being able to play well has a fair bit of complexity in the middle. This is analytical complexity, where players need to learn how to think about the game and derive heuristics for which decision trees best work for them. This is much more satisfying than arbitrary content, but it is still complexity. Depth is the ability of players to make better decisions. This is, of course, only as true as the player thinks it is. If the player does not believe that he or she can make better decisions, even if actually he or she can, the game has no further depth for that player. Now, this definition is both binary and dependent on individual players. So, to make it more meaningful for you designing the game, you need to look at the amount of players who still feel that they can make better decisions and the length for which they feel this is true. Essentially, how long does it take for your players to figure out a strategy that they feel is degenerate? You're fine if this is longer than the expected playtime of the game. Many people, when trying to increase depth, add more pieces or more rules to the game, and thus also increase complexity. Now, this often does increase depth as it widens the decision space. However, let's take a bit of a deeper look at what exactly happens here. When a player loses to a rule or a piece that he or she did not know about, that's a point where the player can then make better decisions, and so that's some depth. The benefit of depth through complexity like this is that the player is guaranteed to be able to improve, as knowing a little data is an actionable most players are capable of. However, the player does not get to feel smart when improving, and losing to something you didn't know about can feel cheap. I think that every designer has some feel for depth and complexity, but laying it out like this hopefully gives you a lens so that you can think about it a little bit clearer. As Sid Meier said, a game is just a series of interesting choices, and hopefully this will help you keep your decisions more interesting.